Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook, and this evening we're on phase 2 of a conversation about the American education system. With me again tonight is Carolee Tolbert. Carolee,
Hi,
thanks
Dave.
for coming back for a second go-around here.
My pleasure.
And this evening we want to talk more about some of the programs that have come into play in the last 10, 15 years to try to help improve or at least have some impact on the education system. Education reform, Carolee, is something that's been talked about for a long time. And in our first show, we were talking about some of the things that occurred over the last 30 or plus years in terms of how maybe some of the nuggets that cause things to kind of go slightly off the rails.
Right.
But there's been a lot of attention on education reform. A lot of this stuff in the press for years now about how American students compare to students in other countries and
Right.
blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So one of the first, I guess, maybe it's not the first, but one of the ones that I can recall that was a big, major effort to try to put some balance into the system was the No Child Left Behind program.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You
Okay.
touched on it briefly at the end of the last show, but so why did this happen and what has been the result from it?
Okay, No Child Left Behind, I'd like to sort of give it a preface, some little history. No Child Left Behind actually was the next generation of Goals 2000. And if Goals 2000 was brought into the public arena by President Bill Clinton,
Okay.
after they had a meeting in 1999 of the governors. And so as a result of that meeting and the commitment on the part of the governors in every state to make sure that education reform had top priority, the federal government then developed Goals 2000. From Goals 2000 then came No Child Left Behind, which strengthened Goals 2000, and it required a timeline of the year 2014 as the date to make sure that every kid in our public school system could read and write and could graduate prepared for work or career. Since No Child Left Behind, now we have Race to the Top, which is Obama.
Which is the newest
Right.
iteration, and I guess there's some discussion because they have to renew the
Reauthorize. They have
There
to
we go.
reauthorize No
Right.
Child Behind, just like they had to reauthorize Goals 2000
Right.
under
And so
a
they
new
did it, and
name.
they changed the name.
Right,
but
exactly.
So one of the things about what you said, though, that it sounds to me like there's a certain consistency within that. Goals 2000 to No Child Left Behind, yeah, they changed the name, but it sounds like there was not a complete shift of objective.
Right.
It was more of I'm going to name it for me because I'm the president now.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then let me also say that all of it was built around the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. That is what actually started the whole conversation about standards and expectations for learning.
When was that?
That was back in 1965. Lyndon
Really?
B. Johnson signed that into law under the War on Poverty.
Oh, yeah.
So again, it's a journey in terms of each reauthorization is an improvement on the previous initiative.
Right.
Now in California, because that's where we are, in order to use those dollars, the states had to actually implement the law, but then they also had to come up with a program of their own in terms of our style. So our legislators actually then passed the law, the Senate Bill 1X. Now Senate Bill 1X contained the IIUSP program, which stands for the Immediate Intervention Underperforming Schools program.
Okay.
And those were that program was designed to assist schools in improving the education of their students. The beauty of SB 1X, No Child Left Behind, is that it desegregates data so that now you cannot hide subgroups of students. If we look at certain scores, test scores, we can see that, oh, this school is the students in this school are scoring at 500. Well, if you desegregate that data by groups, you can see what African American students are doing, Asian students are doing, Hispanic students are doing, white students are doing, Filipino students, whatever, Native American students are doing it by groups. Then you use that money to actually target resources to help those kids who are under the benchmark gain momentum and get on track for learning.
That's one of the things that I'm referring to this U.S. News and World Report issue from January 2010, where they talked about one of the things that No Child Left Behind managed to do was to expose some of these things, because you were able to average scores previously, and so you could. They say you can lie with statistics any way you want to, and so it made it look like things were better than they actually were.
Right.
And so now, all right. So now this sort of lays it bare. This is exactly the way circumstances are.
Right.
So No Child Left Behind has created an environment that has allowed us to see things for how they actually are.
Right.
Did the program then have the whatever it needed to enable the teachers, the administrators, or whatever, to move forward to correct the problem?
Yes, and I love to cite this example. I was working in a school in Los Angeles, an elementary school, and again, schools in Los Angeles are big, whether they're elementary or high school. And this school had a population of 756 students. In that group, in that school, they had two major subgroups: Hispanic youngsters and African American youngsters. Now, the API, which is the Academic Performance Index score that the states assign for each of the schools to achieve in order to get to that 800 mark by the year 2014. So this particular school had to move, I think it was 13 points, okay, and they were like at 300 and something or something like that, some low score. So what was interesting, the year that we started working with this school, we engaged the parents, we engaged the teachers. The administrator was fantastic. She was absolutely a great school leader because she knew her curriculum, she knew instruction, and she also knew how to engage people in ways that made them feel comfortable. Change is not always comfortable, but change is necessary sometimes.
True.
So this particular school, the Hispanic youngsters had moved, I think, 75 points that year. The African American youngsters had moved 7. So we had to deal with why those African American students only moved 7 points and they only had to move 13. Okay. And so what we did was we actually looked at the data, and had we just looked at it overall, we would have had an average of more than meeting that score, right? So based upon the work that we did together, teachers, parents, and principal, the next year the youngsters, when the scores came out, the Hispanic youngsters moved 95 points.
Wow.
The African American students moved 170.
Cool.
170. Wow. That was unheard of. 170 points. So that really showed the school, the staff, that those kids could learn. There was nothing wrong with the kids. It was how we were teaching them and what our expectations were.
So that implies that when you get into a given environment, you really need to understand what the dynamics are within that environment.
Exactly.
And therefore, the way you're bringing your educational curriculum or practices to that school will logically differ from school to school. Okay.
Right.
With the effort to reach certain standards that are common, is that a problem? Does that conflict with these? We need to get here. Is there a we need to get here and we need to do it this way, or is there we need to get here? Determine what's the best way to do that within the environment you're in. You understand my question?
There was a concept that surfaced in the early 90s. It was called constructivism. And constructivism,
okay.
Again, education ease, what can I say? Constructivism meant that you met the child where they were. And so from that concept, then what has become embedded For example, in the 10 features of effective schools, they talk about adaptive pedagogy. That simply means that you adjust your teaching to
the
where
student.
that exactly.
Good. Okay, good. So, one of the things that I think I mentioned to you that my daughter's a fifth grade teacher, which is very cool.
That's cute.
Yeah,
Yes.
she's and she's been, I guess, is into her third year now, and so the existing environment and system is the only one that she's known as a teacher, and some of her colleagues, and she has mentioned feeling sometimes that I need to impart these certain pieces of data because it says I need to get the kids to know this stuff because that's what the test information is, and so there's this am I teaching to a test sort of a thing. And I've heard this from people before, and you and I actually had a little conversation about this.
Yes, we did.
And I'm not convinced that I don't know how to have an opinion of that one way or the other. So I wanted to kind of get from your perspective whether or not this is,
Well, let's just talk about testing. Let's just talk about testing.
Yeah, please.
Let's talk about testing. There's a school of thought that says we don't need testing. Kids don't need to be tested. Or a test is not the true measure of a child's knowledge or skills. To some degree, that is correct. However, we live in a real world. And we all have to take tests. We have to get accustomed to taking tests. Our jobs are dependent upon taking a test. We compete against each other all the time. So part of that whole K-12 experience is what? To prepare youngsters to be productive citizens and to get a job.
Right.
So they have to have had some prior experience with some of that in order to be competitive once they graduate from high school. Testing also provides us with a measurement, an objective measurement of how well the child is learning the subject in which I am teaching. It also tells me how well I'm teaching it to that child. So the scores are a combination of the two things. Oftentimes we hear teaching and learning in the same sentence because that's true. Because it's how well I'm teaching the curriculum and how well that child is learning the curriculum are connected. They're interwoven. You cannot separate them. I have gone into classrooms. I am a teacher. I've gone into classrooms, and I when I go in that classroom, I close the door, and it's me and the students. So the students then look at me as the giver of the information. I provide that instruction. No one else can do that for that child that day. It is my responsibility to make sure that that child is getting it, or at least they are trying to get it, and I'm trying to give it to them. And there's no perfect situation, but I am saying that the responsibility for making sure that children are learning the material is in that classroom, is on that teacher. That is why we pay teachers, and in fact, youngsters don't have an option of going to school or not. It is legally required. We must send our children to school. Parents can just not keep their child at home unless they're going to homeschool. So education has to be happening for that child. There's the law that says, that's called compensatory education. That means every child in the United States is required to go to school from first grade to 12th grade. 6 to 18, that's the required age.
Okay. So what happens when you're in there? That's the key thing.
So it is incumbent upon that teacher to understand that they are the giver of the knowledge. They're the imparter of that.
See, this gets back to something that we talked about right at the beginning of the first session in our two shows, and that was the perspective of what you're doing is to provide that student with the wherewithal to be able to become a productive member of society.
Exactly.
And we don't always, I don't know that we always think of it in those terms. And that may be unfortunate. Okay, so let's get back to No Child Left Behind and then the next iteration coming up. So we exposed the flaws in the system, which is a useful thing because if you don't know where the problem is, you can't fix it. So now we know where some of that is. And so this next iteration is intended to provide resources and methodologies that are going to help raise the overall ability for both the teachers to teach and the students to learn, to bring them up to this level of knowledge base that's targeted for 2014.
It's not that much difference. I actually read the law and I read the state's application. I mean, it's not much different. They're just new, basically new names. There's more money in the race to the top. There was also, let me just backtrack too, the IIUSP program was working. And when I look at Race to the Top, I'm seeing some of the same exact strategies, the same emphases. So it's really not changing. I think what we're getting more now is more of a sense of urgency that we need to prepare our kids for the global marketplace now.
Is the new initiative, or was it tied to No Child Left Behind? One of the things that I remember reading was that there were national standards. Each state was able to do its own thing. And was that prior to No Child Left Behind, or?
It was alongside because they were talking about national standards they've been talking about national standards for a long time. Remember I went back to Goals 2000.
Right.
Those were about national standards. Okay.
Have we got there yet, or are we getting?
We're getting there. We're getting close to that because in order for districts to take advantage of the funds, they have to agree to the Common Core standards.
Which makes sense. I mean, one of the things that you talked about previously too was when you were talking about your experience in the Oakland School District, where there was no common curriculum within the Oakland School District. So how do you? If your folks move across town and you're still in the city of Oakland, what are you going to learn when you're in the new school?
Exactly. And did you learn enough to help you do well in the other school?
And in today's society, where it's real easy to move across country, my family with my kids, we moved across country twice.
Exactly.
California, New Hampshire, we came back again, a different part of the state. So it's like
apples and oranges.
Exactly. And if you have that common framework, then I think I can see that as a net positive.
Exactly.
I want to go to another topic that you and I had touched on at one point as well. The system as it's structured in the United States versus the system as it's structured in, say, Europe, where one of the things that you keep seeing and hearing is that we want to get all of our kids up through high school and into college. We want to get 100% of our kids to go to a 4-year institution, or 2-year or 4-year institution, for whatever, because they think it's the right thing to do. And some of the processes that I don't have firsthand knowledge of, but I have a lot of friends who are from Germany or France or some the European countries, and they want to expose the student to as many possibilities as they're going up through that period to the to K through 12, and maybe the right path for them is to go into the 4-year university, become a PhD in physics, but maybe they would be they would prefer to become like, the design engineer that's building the next car or something. So there's more of a
well, it's really about post-secondary options.
There you go.
Okay.
That's a nice way of putting it. Thank you.
Here
I am rambling on. I'm trying to get there.
I noticed. Anyway. But one of the great experiences I had as a school board member was I was the board member responsible for school to career.
School to career, okay.
I had the opportunity of going to Washington, D.C. in 1994 to the White House when Bill Clinton signed the School to Work Opportunities Act. And that act was the sort of validating of that whole post-secondary options movement. And what post-secondary options says basically is that schools are no longer the sorters. Remember, in the Stanford did this professor at Stanford wrote this book called Schools as Sorters, and what that meant is schools actually sorted kids into vocational ed or into college. Well, that is not that should have ever happened, but that was done away with, and when it was done away with, it says families and students make those decisions. School people do not make those decisions. But the But the baseline is we prepare children for either one in K-12.
Right.
So that they have the
because
option.
there's common skill sets. You
Right.
need to know how to read and write and balance
Exactly.
a checkbook and, you know.
Exactly. And one of my memorable experiences is when I went to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I went to a factory. Now, I'm a child of the 50s. So my understanding and vision of factories was the grease and
right.
the hard hats and the overalls and all of that. Well, I went to this factory in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was pristine, it was clean, it had computers, you had one or two people operating them. So I really got a jolt into reality of what the future looked like for our kids. And so that said to me, we have to teach our children high-level math. They have to know how to do technical reading. They have to learn how to critically think or think critically. We have to expose them to different options and opportunities. Trades is another. We are dying in the trades.
Yeah, for
Our
sure.
people companies don't have enough people going into the trade, so
Right.
that's a real need. And electricians get a lot of money, so you don't necessarily have to get a college degree to make $100 an hour. So it is, what is it that child is good at? How are they wired? Let's give them
What do they
opportunities,
enjoy?
exposures,
Yeah.
using their interests and talents to help them
Are we getting back
understand
to that?
why.
Are
Yes,
we
we
there?
are.
Okay,
We're not
great.
there. We're getting
We're getting
back
back
to
to
it
that.
because again, it became, the pendulum swung. It was all about vocational education for a lot of kids. Then now it became vocational education was bad. Now we have to make sure every child is tracked to college.
Right.
That was wrong as well.
Right.
So now we're in the
Opposite
middle.
extreme. Okay,
Exactly.
going back
So
to the
I
middle.
want to talk about 5 options. One is military service. Another is trades. Another is career. Another is college. Another is volunteers. I tell kids all the time, companies don't want volunteers if you get Fs. If you get Fs in
Right.
school, you cannot volunteer for this organization.
Right.
So it really is about post-secondary options
Very
and
cool.
preparing our kids to go into work or
We've
college.
talked some about the teachers. We've talked about the administrators. We've talked some about the legislators. Let's talk about the we've talked a little bit about the business people and their efforts. Let's talk about this is a delicate subject. Let's talk about
Parents?
the unions.
Oh, the unions. Oh, good.
And the parent. The parents are important. Well, I think
Okay.
we know that if the parents aren't there to contribute, that they are a linchpin that makes all this other stuff go. But those
Right.
we don't have a lot of time left. But what can you tell? What are your thoughts on those two topics?
Well, the unions. The unions are I would say the gatekeepers, because, and I'm going to specifically talk about the teachers unions. They are the most important adult in a child's life other than their parents. They are critical in terms of providing that educational experience for kids.
Right.
Parents don't do it. The dentist doesn't do it. The doctor does. It's the teacher
Right.
that does it. We have somehow gotten away from what it is we are supposed to be doing, and it's almost as though there's this conflict between adult employees and children. That should not be, because we're all there to make sure that the kids get what they need in order to contribute. It is not okay to not think that you are responsible for the part that you're responsible for.
Right.
As a board member, I was responsible for setting policy, setting the tone, making sure we got the money, doing things that board members do.
Right.
Okay, I would not expect a teacher to do my job.
Right.
I was doing my job. In the classroom, that teacher is all important. One of the we shared this in previous conversations too. One of the things that I do is I work with kids on probation, and it is incredible how many of those youngsters, particularly boys, don't have the reading and writing skills that they need as high school students. they read or write at a 5th or 6th grade level, but they're in
Wow.
the 11th grade with 15 credits.
Right.
That is unconscionable.
Right.
So how is it that we promoted those kids through that system with 15 credits, and then they don't even know how to read or write?
Right.
So it is critical, I think, for the unions, and in fact, the our Race to the Top application was not funded.
Right. This last time, the first
Okay,
time, yeah.
it was not funded, and one of the problems that the reviewers cited was that the lack of support from the unions.
Ah. Wow.
Okay, so they are critical. They
Yeah.
are a really big piece of this, and we have to find some way, some common ground. You know, that's the term for union leaders
Right.
to encourage their members or to provide leadership in
Right.
that area.
I think this ties right back to looking at that fundamental first principle. Why are we here?
Exactly.
Okay, and if we do that, then we should be able to figure out how to provide the best that we can to our teachers who
Right.
deserve the best.
Exactly.
And as you said, if they, there are some that
Shouldn't be there.
but
that's not the
let's-
majority of them.
and the unions can be a lot of help for that. We have less than 2 minutes left in the show.
Oh my.
So what is the role of the parent in all of this?
The parent has to provide a lot of the nurturing. They need to make sure that their kids are fed. One of the problems I have to say is that too many parents think the schools are supposed to feed their kids and do all of that. And then when parents don't engage, we wonder why. Well, we've taken a lot of that responsibility from the parent. They can stay, the kids can stay after school. They don't have to go home. They can have dinner. We do everything at the school for the kids. And then
Right.
when the parents don't show up for parent-teacher
like, what the
conferences,
heck, yeah.
we're saying, why aren't they here? Because they're not accustomed to being there.
That's an interesting point, and on that one we're going to have to end off. But that is actually kind of interesting because what it does is it says that we have engineered a system that has almost taken away some of their responsibilities, and
Exactly.
they need to have it in order for the whole system
That's right.
to work. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your being here to listen to us and watch us here on Reference Point. Carol Lee, I really want to thank you for coming. This has
My
been
pleasure,
fantastic,
Dave.
and I hope you folks out there have learned something and support your education systems.
Exactly.
And look for ways that you can help. So we'll see you next time on Reference Point.